Okay, before you even post another comment about it, I just want to say that yes, I am currently working on the review for Everything Will Be Alright in the End. When can you expect to see it? I have no idea. See, rock critic isn't my full-time job, and my schedule tends to get super busy towards the end of the year, so it really just depends on how much free time I can squeeze out. But it is taking precedence over everything else at the moment, so hopefully the wait won't be too crazy long. I'm shooting for the end of November, but anything could happen in the meantime, so all I can do is ask for your patience on this one, guys. I'll be posting updates, as always, to social media, so if you want to follow me there, I'll be certain to keep you in the loop. Okay, with that little chestnut out of the way, okay, now that this monster is out of the way, and this monster isn't quite ready yet, and this monster has decided to fuck off for the time being, let's do like we did last time a large project ate a giant chunk of my time, and play a bit of catch-up. I listened to a lot of albums while I was grinding away, and decided we'd discuss the top 12 that stuck out to me the most. That doesn't necessarily mean they were good. In fact, there's several on this list that are quite the opposite. But for one reason or another, these are some of the albums that committed themselves to memory after I blitzkrieged through literally hours of music. So, in no particular order, how about we start off with... Sweet mechanized Jesus, how have I talked for this long about Weezer and not once mentioned Matt Sharp? What the hell kind of rock critic am I? What a poser. Unsubscribe. But yeah, to make a long story criminally short, Matt Sharp's influence was a major, and to many sorely missed, contribution to Weezer's early sound. So the Rentals is kinda served as a substitute for that particular Weezer crowd that thinks the band pretty much died after Pinkerton bellied up. If you want the shorthand answer to the question, why does Weezer sound so different these days, the Rentals' stellar back catalog serves as a good explanation as to where a good chunk of that early magic went. And if you're looking for an album to start with, I think this one does the job fairly well. The deep, fuzzy bass lines and the power and impact behind the drumming work as a nice counterbalance to the bright, poppy synths and softly spoken vocals of Sharp and co-vocalists Jess Wolfe and Holly Lacing. This album is big and atmospheric while maintaining a colorful pop sensibility and a mean sense of hook crafting. I know that sounds tricky to pull off because, well, it is, but the Rentals seem to always be able to do it with severe excellence, and this latest piece is no exception. Do yourself a favor and give this a stream. There's a good chance you'll be craving more by the time you're done. Lost in Alphaville gets 5 Omegas out of 5. Hey, since we're on the subject of making up for lost time, let's talk about an album that I was originally gonna review in fucking June. Metal fans were definitely keeping their horns close to the ground with this one. When Angela Gossow announced her intention to retire from the band and hire a new lead singer, it left a lot of their fan base putting their fingers into the necks of their shirts and going, "Ugh." You can probably count on one hand the number of bands that were able to survive a lead singer transition, but I guarantee you can count on one hand the number of female metal vocalists able to match Gossow's trademark growls. So any review of War Eternal is basically going to be centered on Gossow's replacement, Alyssa White Glues? The one with the blue hair. And to be frank, she's pretty damn solid on this release. While her style is somewhat similar to Gossow's, she has an ever so slightly higher register, and she incorporates just a bit more melody into her delivery. She actually delivers a near perfect balance between remaining familiar to the source while still stamping her own unique spin on things. She's an insanely talented vocalist, and I think she possesses the charisma and force necessary to fill the surprisingly petite shoes of Gossow. Though Ms. Whiteglue certainly isn't the only standout thing on this album, the instrumentation and riff crafting is as solid as ever. This album feels a bit more symphonic and melodic than what we've heard out of more recent Arch Enemy releases, and it's just straight up one of the more catchy EA albums we've heard in a good while. This album was a pretty big risk to take, and to be honest, this is one of those ever so rare instances in rock where the risk actually pays off. Definitely give it a try, especially if you're into Arch Enemy. War Eternal gets 4.5 blue-haired ladies out of 5. Let's stick to metal for the time being, shall we? What I really loved most about War Eternal was just how big of a risk the band took to even make the record. These guys, on the other hand, haven't taken a single bloody risk in nearly a decade. For real, what the hell happened to these guys? Their early catalog possesses some of the most feral and ferocious cuts of early millennial melodic death metal. Hell, even Come Clarity will peel the paint off the walls if you blast it loud enough. But it seems like every album since then has just gotten more and more bland and safe and painfully uninteresting. And I think I'm at the point where I'm finally starting to lose my patience with these guys. Don't get me wrong, for what it is, it's certainly not the worst thing I've ever heard. Hell, it's not even the worst thing on this list by a long shot. It does have a few moments of loftiness, and it makes for a smooth, atmospheric listen at times. It's just, judging that this album is from the same guys that gave us this, I really never thought I'd be describing an In Flames album like this, I won't argue that there is a certain stripe of metal fan that will probably find this fairly enjoyable, but I don't know, guys. When I press play on an In Flames record, I expect to, hear an In Flames record. I really don't like the direction they've taken over these past 3 albums. It reminds me kind of another band that had a perfectly fine sound, but just kept tinkering with it and adding things that nobody asked for, and... well, I'll put it this way. If the next album has a Lil Wayne cameo on it, I'll be in no way surprised. Siren Charms gets 2 fire extinguishers out of 5. Whew, boy, the amount of requests I got for this one were one thing, but the divisive tone between those requests was what was really staggering. Every single request seemed to fall on either, please review this, Crash, this is like the best new band ever, or please review this, Crash, these little shits have it coming, and nothing in between. And, well, I hate to say it, but it looks like I'm gonna have to disappoint both camps on this particular review. I mean, I can totally see where all the rancor is coming from here. This band leans way heavy on the teeny bopper twee, and in an age where good honest rock is hard to find anywhere on the charts, it can be a little upsetting to see a band like this become ultra successful, while a band like, say, the Copyrights still doesn't find any love outside of the margins. This doesn't feel so much like a rock album as it feels like somebody gave the guys in One Direction Bratz Rock Angels makeovers, but then again, that's all it's really trying to be, and when I sat down and actually gave the album a fair shake, it wasn't the worst thing I'd ever heard, honestly. There are some catchy, if insanely overpolished hooks here and there, and there are a few choruses that, if I heard them on a Newfound Glory record, I would have probably been more forgiving of, let's be fair. That's not to say this album isn't without its cringier moments, like a line where they directly reference one of the douchier major clothing labels. I mean, for fuck's sake, that shit made me spit bile back when LFO was doing it 15 years ago. But then again, I am so not the target audience for this thing, and to be fair, it isn't trying to be anything apart from what it is, a super safe, super cute facsimile of rock that middle schoolers can listen to without their parents getting a narc on. It's Fisher-Price rock. And sure, I really don't see much in it personally, but hell, I'd rather the kids be listening to this than, well, most of what's popular right now, so no, I don't like it, but I can't get full-on angry about it. 5 Seconds of Summer gets 2.5 Lisa Frank folders out of 5. Here's another album that seems to be causing a bit of ire in the rock community. The Gaslight Anthem is another one of those sincere and soulful punk bands that I admit I'm probably a wee bit too infatuated with. There has to be a name for this subgenre, there just has to. I'm tempted to call it soul punk, but I wouldn't want the unfortunate association with Fall Out Boy to factor into it. Anywho, this album doesn't seem to be getting much love from either fans or critics alike, which worried me on the outset because American slang was the shit, and I'd hate to see another genuinely good act soured so goddamn quickly on us. And after listening to this album, I can kind of understand the reaction it's getting, but I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say I don't really think it's justified. This album is a much different animal to American slang, 59 sound, or even Handwritten for that matter. It's a much slower, sadder, and much more somber affair. It sticks to the slower side of their sound for most of its runtime, and I don't think a lot of people were expecting this kind of album from them, even though, it's pretty much right there in the title. But to me, that's what makes this album so interesting. Gaslight have always been great at writing thoughtful, heart-wrenching lyrics, and here they've written some of their most heart-wrenching songs to date, and the slow, deliberate pacing of this album feels intentional. It's an album of pain, struggle, and relentless hurting. And it hits all of those appropriate marks in order to deliver the tone of hopelessness and regret. Sure, there isn't a lot of swing and swagger on this release. It does drag on for a wee bit too long, and the album art does resemble a big meaty set of swinging testes, but I'll be damned if this album didn't grow on me after a while. If you were one of the original haters of this release, I say give it another chance. Walk into it without the mindset of what a Gaslight album is supposed to sound like, and just take it for what it is. Honestly, it might just surprise you. It's worth a second chance. Get Hurt gets 4 swinging bollocks out of 5. But hey, since we're on the topic of expectations, whew, mine could not have been any higher for this one, right? Anberlin is one of those few rock bands that have never disappointed me. I mean, guys, Cities. That's all I gotta say. These guys are one of the big reasons why, even though I'm not a Christian, I still occasionally check out what's going on in that scene. And hell, regardless of their religious affiliation, they've left us with an outstanding catalog of music. And with this album being their swan song, it's of course going to be their most brilliant, outstanding, jaw-dropping album to date, right? Okay. One thing I want to get clear before you unleash the hounds of Christian war on me, I don't think Lowborn is bad. Not at all. It's still very listenable. There's some genuine moments of power and bravado that we've come to expect from this band over the years, and overall, I would sincerely recommend the album, especially to fans of Anberlin. But if I'm being completely honest, I just have to admit this album didn't outright grab me as hard as some of their other albums have. Perhaps I went into it with the wrong expectations, but seeing as how this was going to be their last album, I figured they would want to crank up the amps to 11 and blow the hinges off the door, but they don't. It's just very, very, very okay. This album just seems a bit more restrained and mellow than what I was hoping for. There aren't a lot of memorable choruses or catchy chants that everybody can scream out in concert. Again, that may simply have to do with my preconceived expectations for this album, but I don't know, if you're gonna end, I figured you'd want to end on your absolute highest note, right? Nothing about this album seemed to stick out all that much for me, though I did still enjoy the experience. If you've been a long time running with these guys, then you should pick it up just to see how it all winds down, but for the uninitiated, I just don't think this is really one of their better works. I say go with Cities or Never Take Friendship Personal first. Lowborn gets 3.5 Where Have Those Fingers Been? Out of 5. Ugh. Oh, Crash, I hear some of you say. You always say positive stuff about Christian artists. I'm half convinced you're just a sleeper cell evangelist trying to convert people through the power of swears. And you know what? You guys might have a point there. I have been way too nice to the Christian rock scene. I mean, yeah, there's some real talent floating around in there, but for every one good artist, there are at least a dozen shit bandits crowding up the room behind them. So, please, if you will, grab one of those cricket bats, join me around this Family Force 5 album, and let's show it that God cannot save it in this place. Ugh, this thing wasn't so much an album as it was a pain threshold test. Family Force 5 releases have always had zero sense of dynamics or creativity. Everything is always mixed so loud and front-heavy, and all the instruments and vocals just blend together into a cacophony of senseless noise without any kind of soul or structure. But this album has taken that mind-grinding formula of theirs and added dubstep to the mix. Fucking dubstep. That's like adding cyanide to an ether and gasoline cocktail. And it's fucking everywhere on this album. Upbeat dance jams, slow-paced ballads, thinly veiled preachy as fuck folk praise and worship songs, and these lyrics, they're the reason atheists exist. With lines like juiced up on faith and I've never seen a soul set free through an argument, it sounds like the kind of shit a 45-year-old youth pastor would say to his kids to try and sound like he was hip and cool and with it, my bromide, and not a creepy middle-aged dude who's devoted his life to children for some baffling reason. And they're all repeated ad nauseum over and over and over and over again. I get it! You really like the Karate Kid! Now stop saying sweep the leg or else I'll sweep your intestines from out of your stomach! Here's the thing. At the end of the day, I'll stick up for any album if the music is good, whether it's Christian, non-Christian. Hell, I'll stand up for a satanic album if it's catchy as all hell. But this album was 15 tracks. 15 fucking tracks of mealy-mouthed, overproduced, underwritten, self-congratulatory, anti-intellectual tripe on a stick. And they stole the title of the album from one of my favorite Rush songs, too, so yeah, as far as I'm concerned, this album can get caught behind the woodshed by creepy youth pastor guy for all I care. Time Stand Still gets 1.5 much better Time Stand Stills out of 5. Seriously, even Hold Your Fire was better than this shit. God, we need to talk about something else. Something good. I need to cleanse my palate of that horrible, freaking garbage. I need something energetic, intense, and insanely proficient. Oh, well, that'll do nicely. Again, we have another band taking a huge risk of continuing on after the loss of a lead singer, with Eddie Hermida, formerly of All Shall Perish, taking over mic duties after the tragic death of original lead singer Mitch Lucker back in 2012. Now, I have to admit I didn't really know much about the band going in, so apart from a bit of research I did into their back catalog, this is pretty much my first big exposure to the group. But I have to say, I'm thoroughly impressed. Hermida really seems to be the right guy for the job here. He exhibits a metric fuck-ton of range in his vocal stylings, switching between earth-shaking growls and glass-shattering shrieks at a moment's notice, and delivering them with the kind of explosive intensity that's necessary to bring a mosh pit to a full raging boil. I am legitimately impressed. The chops on this guy cannot be denied. Not to mention he's got a ton of solid backup out there too, with growling, thunderous bass lines, crunchy, vicious guitar work, and furious blasting drums from the rhythm section. This band seems to have lost absolutely no intensity in the process of recouping their losses, and that alone is impressive. See, this is an album that gets loud right, though admittedly, yeah, comparing this album to Time Stand Still is like comparing apples to cruise missiles, but the technical proficiency, excellent production, and screeching atmosphere that this album builds is a must-own for deathcore fans. Believe the hype, people, this one turned out pretty damn good. You Can't Stop Me gets 4.5 torched stop signs out of 5. Now here's an album that actually wasn't on my list to review initially. I literally just stumbled across it while browsing the Spotify new releases. I gave it a chance out of random curiosity and was thoroughly engaged by the sweeping drum work, elegant piano and synthesizers, and competent vocal stylings and arrangements. It's a very pleasant and cheery experience that's both bombast, infectiously poppy, and skillfully crafted. I was genuinely impressed. And then I did my research and found that this is actually a side project of Jack Antonoff from Fun, and I immediately understood why this album sounds the way it does. And dare I say it, I think I had more, excuse the phrasing, fun with this album than I did with his full-time gig's first release. Well, don't misinterpret me here. I think Nate Roos does have a fine set of pipes, but I always felt that they were sort of misplaced with the rest of the music that Fun usually creates. I mean, you can compare a guy to Freddie Mercury all you want, but if the rest of his band doesn't contain rip-roaring Brian May-style solo work, or classic groove-laden bass stylings like John Deacon, or the crispy, punchy drumming of someone like Roger Taylor, then your band doesn't sound like Queen. I'm sorry. What I like so much about Bleachers is that Antonov's vocal delivery fits the style of the music he creates much better than Roos's scale-scraping, full-blown rockier delivery. And even though he's not the more talented vocalist, he is the one with the style that fits much better for this specific kind of sound. If Fun's near constant, unrelenting radio presence has already caused you to chuck your car stereo into traffic, then you should definitely give this one a spin until the next Fun album comes around. That is, unless radio stations are already doing the same bloody thing to this album. God, I sure hope they aren't. Strange Desire gets 4 Brian Mays out of 5. You know, when I saw this pop up on the new release charts, I just couldn't help but scratch my head. How in the hell does Seether still exist today? As I've hinted in some of my previous videos, I did go through an unfortunately long Seether phase. Hell, nu metal and alt metal were really big in the Midwest where I grew up, so being a young rocker at the time, it was somewhat inescapable. But eventually, I grew up, I matured, I moved on, and so did a lot of people in the early to mid-2000s. But here they are, still chugging away like a sloth crossing the street, and nowhere near as adorable. As a bit of research, I decided to go back and listen to Disclaimer and Carmen Effect to see if, in some bizarre way, they would actually still hold up, and no, they didn't. Though doing so did provide me with a small answer as to why this band might still exist. It's possibly because they haven't changed a bloody thing about their sound in nearly 14 years. It's really just all of the same tired, recycled post-grunge riffs and breakdowns and cliches that we all got sick of listening to by the time Bush Jr. won his second election. I mean, there really isn't anything here you haven't heard on any of their previous releases or on any other tired nu metal band you may remember from those days. All this album really did was make me want to listen to the actual grunge music that inspired it, to hear the guys who did it right the first time around. It's generic, it's bland, it's severely dated, and frankly, I have no good reason as to why it still exists. Some people have said that nu metal gets a bad rap these days, but I mean, given the content that its old dogs seem to keep churning out, I'm hardly inclined to agree with you on that one. Isolate and Medicate gets 1.5 stupid-looking former selves out of 5. You know, I'd even go as far as to say that nu metal is just a dead horse at this point and that we should really all just stop beating it. If it weren't for bands like... Apparently bands like these guys, Immure, Of Mice and Men, and some of their ilk are part of a new trend that some are referring to as the second wave of nu metal. And all I can really say to that is, are you guys fucking insane?! We're still trying to recover from the wounds that the previous nu metal fuckwits inflicted on us, and you guys want to rip off the bandage for more stabbing? Jesus Christ, that's like repairing the damage King Kong has done to your city by hiring Godzilla as a contractor. And these guys have stunned me by somehow being equally as bad as the album I declared worst release I've ever listened to for the channel. Jesus, the top spot for my end of the year shit list is going to get rather crowded this time around, isn't it? This album was so strikingly awful, I debated whether or not to even cover it. But this band has been getting some notoriety due to their, antics, so I think I need to let you guys know what you'd be in for if you decided to listen to this album. Pain. Like, actual painful moments of terribleness. David Gunn is possibly the worst vocalist and lyricist I've ever seen. It's like reading through some middle schooler's bad poetry. At times it's so bad, it's almost funny. And in other places, it's so creepy that you need to take a cold shower and Vicodin to purge yourself of what you just heard. And the fact that he delivers almost all of his lines this close to the mic, sounding like he's a 5-year-old kid with a bad constipation, just pours salt all over the wound. And the music backing him up is no better. It has the Amir problem of being so loud, bland, and terribly mixed that even if there were any good licks to find, you wouldn't be able to make them out. And the only message that this album seems to want to shout at you is that Flint, Michigan is a really shitty place. Yeah, we all kind of figured that out around the time it congealed Michael Moore into existence. But seriously though, Flint, Michigan is a city that is in dire need of help. And if any of you Flint natives are watching this, I sincerely hope you get the miracles that your town needs to survive. And I hope you get them soon. I really, honestly do. But these guys are so not helping your cause. Avoid this album at all costs. Avoid. Flint, Michigan deserves better than this. They really do. Memoirs of a Murderer gets half of a RoboCop out of 5. You know, after letting that vile trash infect my soul and my ear holes, I need something good, something genuine and bold, something that I can constantly rely on to pick up my spirits and stir my soul to help promote the greater good of mankind, something to just believe in myself again. Oh. Hi, Rise Against. You couldn't have gotten here any sooner. I've been a fan of these guys since Siren Song of the Counterculture, and their luminescence has yet to dim on me, and I'm happy to report that this band is still shining on like crazy, socially conscious diamonds. In fact, I feel like they've amped up their intensity from their previous release, Endgame. Songs like The Great Die-Off and The Eco-Terrorist and me showcase Tim McIlrath's throaty, howling vocal delivery in a way that I don't think we've seen since Siren Songs. And the crunchy, ravenous guitars and pulsing drums stampede rampantly throughout almost the entirety of this release, save for one slower track, People Live Here. And guys, no joke, People Live Here is probably one of their best acoustic numbers ever. Yes, even better than Swing Life Away. I would not kid about that, trust me. Rise Against represents a kind of aggressiveness and earnestness we just don't see enough of in today's modern punk. They've always served as a reliable go-to source for genuine inspiration and righteous indignation when things are just too overproduced, too poppy, too insipid, tired, and hopeless. I'm glad Rise Against is there to remind us that the flame of punk never did die out. We just may not have been looking in the right direction. The Black Market gets 5 Siren Songs. I said Siren Songs! Out of 5.